Thank you, Michael. These first couple of days have been a learning experience for all of us here on the Hildegard Way team, and maybe many of you as well are learning how to use Zoom. I've been a professional retreat leader for many years, and I've learned over the last few months that leading retreats on Zoom is a whole different ballgame than leading them in person. It does change the energy on our end when we can't see and hear you, and we understand that you may be feeling some of that as well. A pilgrimage, it's even more of a challenge. And so, as Michael mentioned yesterday, none of us on the team have led a virtual pilgrimage. And so we are literally making this path as we walk it. We appreciate your patience as we work through technical issues with links and Wi-Fi and microphones. We believe in a couple more days, we'll have the hang of it and it'll be running smoothly. Thank you sincerely to Michael and Heather for all the work that they're doing behind the scenes to edit some of that out and to create really beautiful videos that you're able to access online following our daily live journey. As I reflected on my own experience during the opening these last couple of days, I realized that I'm feeling as though I'm coming into these sessions a bit rushed, and maybe you are as well. So what I'd like to do is take a minute each day, immediately following the ringing of the bells, to just be in silence, to ground ourselves in the presence of God before we head out on our pilgrim path. We are here on this journey to learn about the remarkable woman, St. Hildegard of Bingen, but not for information's sake alone. We are here to be transformed by her spirit and her energy, so that we might leave this experience empowered to go forth and do the work that God's calling each one of us to do. Being fully present in the mystery, as I just mentioned, is a bit of a challenge when we're in the midst of so much technology, but I believe we can create our own personal sanctuaries in the midst of this by taking just a little bit of time, even if it's only a minute, to silently meditate and put ourselves in that space. So we'll begin now with the ringing of our bells. Church bells are sacred. They are referred to in the monastic world as the voice of God because they call our attention to prayer. When I was in Bingen in 2015, I stayed for a week at St. Hildegard's Abbey, and I loved hearing the church bells ring throughout the day. Bells wake us up. They were used in the Middle Ages to grab the attention of the community, to stop for a few moments and step back from the work that they were doing, to become fully aware of God's presence wherever they were at and in whatever they were involved with. The bells here at the Hildegard House call us each day at noon, Eastern Standard Time, to wake up to the presence of God here in our midst as we head out on our pilgrimage. When this formal pilgrimage is complete, I imagine many of you might continue to engage in daily meditation and spiritual reflection by continuing along on your own personal journey. You probably don't have access to a massive bell tower, but you could very easily create your own Vox Dei experience using a small handbell, or even a singing bowl. Whatever it takes to wake us up to a reality beyond the chaos of our daily life experience is an experience of the Vox Dei. Yesterday, we were in Eder Oberstein learning about Hildegard's writings on the precious stones. Today, as Michael mentioned, we're going to the place of her birth, Niederhosenbach. I was in this little town in 2017, and then again last year on the pilgrimage. Prior to 2017, I was under the impression that Hildegard was born in the town of Birmersheim, because that's where the scholarship was at when I began my Hildegard studies. Today, the scholarship is leaning more towards Niederhosenbach. This morning, in lieu of a sermon, I would like to share a personal story with you, a pilgrimage story, before we head out on our own journey today. Many years before I met Dr. Esser, and before there was a Hildegard Way, I traveled to Bingen for the first time. I was working on my PhD, and my daughter was in Berlin on a class trip and encouraged me to meet her in Germany. I went to Bingen by myself for about a week to walk in Hildegard's footsteps before meeting up with my daughter. I had no idea where I was going, but I boarded a plane to Frankfurt with a small map of Hildegard's holy places. I arrived at St. Hildegard's Abbey a few days before my 43rd birthday, still feeling as though I must be dreaming. I could not believe I was in her land and was going out to explore it on my own. And no, I do not speak German, which made it all the more challenging. I had an itinerary of places I wanted to visit each day, and so I quickly learned how to get around on the train system. Birmersheim was on my list. I took the train to what I thought was the closest stop, and then walked several miles to a small town. As I was walking, I found myself moving from open fields to wooded areas. I could see the town off in the far distance, so I kept making my way towards it. Not quite sure if I was on private property or if there were any animals who would not take kindly to me being there. I was nervous being out in the middle of nowhere and by myself, but it was a profoundly spiritual experience. I arrived in Birmersheim and could not find the church or even a store where I could ask for directions. I came across a woman sweeping her driveway, and I asked her for some water. I was really thirsty and clearly lost. The woman looked at me with a very interesting facial expression and asked me, "Where did you come from?" I explained to her how I got there and where I was trying to go. "I'm trying to find Hildegard's birthplace," I told her. I am sure she was holding back her laughter, and I imagine I looked like hell. She excused herself to go in the house and get me a bottle of water, and probably laughed while she was in there. When she returned, she said, "You're in the wrong place." She went on to give me directions to how to get to Birmersheim, but I don't remember a word she said. I knew I would never find the train station again because I had no idea which fields or woods I had walked through to get to the town that I could visibly see in the distance. From the town, I could not see the train station. As I was preparing to leave, I must have looked like I was about to cry because she called out and said, "My son will drive you to the train station." I really had no option but to accept her offer, though I was very uncomfortable getting in the car with a person I didn't know. In hindsight, I imagine they were probably more concerned about this crazy woman standing in their driveway asking for water than I was about getting in the car with her son. I turned my phone on for a second to ping off a tower in case I went missing, the police and my family would at least know the last place I was at. It was a full and complete act of surrender to God's protection and to the journey. I understood for the first time what Hildegard meant by the image of being a feather on the breath of God. I had no idea where it was blowing me, and at this point, it was completely and utterly out of my control. Contrary to my fears, her son kindly drove me to the train station, and I found my way to Bermersheim. When I got to the town, it was much larger than the one I had just been at. There were lots of stores and activity, but I had a difficult time finding a taxi driver to take me to the church. When I finally found one, with the help of a restaurant waitress, he was not impressed with my Hildegard map and almost caused a car accident driving me there. When we arrived, I was afraid to ask him if he would give me a few minutes so that I could get out and take pictures, because I needed a ride back to the train station. But by that point, I realized I just didn't care anymore. I had traveled too far to not get where I was going. I asked him to wait for me, cost me a small fortune in cab fare, but the pictures that I took are priceless. In 2017, I visited the museum at the Dissy Bodenberg and was talking with the curator there. She informed me that my information on Hildegard's birthplace was inaccurate. She was born in Niederhosenbach, the curator explained, and proceeded to give me directions on how to get there. On that trip, my family was with me and we had rented a car, and so it was much easier and safer to find our way. I share this story with you today because it was a significant part of my personal journey in the land of St. Hildegard. It was also a pilgrimage. I had completely surrendered myself to the mystery, to the experience of what was in front of me, and I was transformed by it. There were risks involved. There are always risks involved. While our experience on a Zoom pilgrimage is less dangerous, much more organized, and more rational than what I embarked on, the core tenets are the same. We are heading out today in search of Hildegard's birthplace. We are stepping back to the beginning of her story to experience the space where an unexpected, creative genius entered this world. We do this with the hope of finding something along the path that inspires us to follow in her creative example. And so as we prepare to head out today to find Hildegard's birthplace, we take a moment and gather ourselves in prayer. Good and loving God, we are a pilgrim people searching for renewal and rebirth. As we set out to encounter the birthplace of St. Hildegard, protect our efforts along the way. Help us to awaken to the creative spirit within our own minds and hearts. Grant us the courage to help others awaken to your divine presence within and around them. We ask all of this in your holy name. Amen. We will now watch a video from the Hildegard Way.
Join us now on the Hildegard Way from the town of Herrstein to the village of Niederhosenbach. According to recent historical research, Hildegard was born in this remote place, which was dominated by the manor house of her family. Our station is at the Protestant Church of Niederhosenbach. The church contains a facsimile edition of the Liber Scivias. we listen to Hildegard speaking about her family and childhood. My father Hildebrecht was a lord of Bermersheim and Niederhosenbach. My noble mother Mechthild came from Merxheim. She gave birth to 10 children. You will probably know my brothers Trudwin, who as the oldest is the heir of our manor house, Broricus, who later became a cantor in Mainz Cathedral, and Hugo, who became a canon in Tolai. You will also have heard of my 4 sisters, Irmgard, Jutta, Odila, and Clemencia. As the 10th child, my parents dedicated me to God while sighing, just as one gives the tithe of the harvest to the church. Later on, I truly accepted that my parents wished me to live a religious life, when at age 16 I took the veil in the monastery of St. Disibord. I will talk more about this later. At that time, I grew up well sheltered in the circle of my siblings, and I can only say that I had a very good life. Our noble family was related to the Earls of Sponheim, and of course we had servants, and the farmers from the surrounding land had to deliver goods in kind to our manor house. For everyone, there was always much work to do, but we also celebrated the feasts of the church: Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, St. John's, and All Saints. Sometimes my father rode to the seat of the Archbishop in Golden Mines. This big city on the river had always impressed him again with its massive walls and grand churches. From there he brought back precious fabrics and spices from faraway countries, and once also a Mainz armor, just like the ones that were also sold in London. We also heard much about what was going on in the empire, about the imprisonment of King Henry by his own son in Böckelheim Castle, and about the return of Archbishop Ruthard of Mainz after years of exile. As a child, of course, I did not understand much of these political events. I was often ill, and I saw things that others found only peculiar or at best miraculous. In spite of all the love in the circle of my family, I was also often not understood, and I was a lonely soul. From Niederhosenbach, the Hildegard Way leads through forests and lawns to the village of Bergen. There is a guest house and a Hildegard pilgrimage station. The way from Bergen takes its course to Kirn, thereby passing the brook valley Trübenbachtal. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning about this stage of the Hildegard Way. We hope you continue with us on our pilgrimage walk.
Okay, Shannon, it's back to you for a moment as I get ready for the Dr. Beverly Kienzle video. Actually, I'm going to turn my video on just for a second here so I can talk with you. And I'm remembering that day when we went there, and just how everything kind of got really small by going into the church, and it became more real, I think. Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
So if you would just maybe speak for a minute or two, that would be great. I also just wanted, if people are noticing, there are captions with the video, and I wanted just to say thank you to Dr. Beverly Kienzle and Dr. Deborah Stout for helping us make sure that we had the right labels, the right spellings, and everything. And I just really appreciate your help in doing that to support this project. So.
Thank you, Michael. So as the video highlighted, Hildegard was tithed to Dissy Bodenberg at the age of 8 years old. I often, as a mother, imagine what it must have been like for Hildegard's mom to have parted with her at such a young age. In some ways, being tithed at that young age was a welcomed opportunity for women, because it gave them an opportunity to receive an education and to have life experiences that they may not have otherwise had. It also protected them from being put into arranged marriages, which was a very big problem then. It still is in many parts of our world today. And somebody of Hildegard's birth, which was a little bit of a higher on the social scale, she would have possibly been used as a political pawn for marriage. And so there were benefits to her having been tithed, but of course there were many, many challenges. As we prepare for this next segment, I do want to highlight that you are in for a real treat. Dr. Beverly Kienzle has been a hero of mine when I was working on my graduate work and my postgraduate work. I too, as she expressed in the opening day, was so excited to come across this text of Hildegard's Homilies. And while I have some Latin in my background, I am in no way, shape, or form, my mind is just not wired for language. And I have always really kind of lamented that I don't have the ability to translate those texts. And when I do come across translations, I just really appreciate the scholarship behind it. And I really, early on in my academic career, Dr. Kienzle's book was a part of my library and remains a very significant part of my library. Because it really inspired me to be able to read her homilies, to know that she preached, and preached even with permission from the powers that be of her day. And as Dr. Kienzle pointed out, many of her homilies are also pieces and parts of them, at least, some of them in their entirety, are in her letters, and I have a deep love for her letters. And so I just want to personally say how privileged I feel today to be sharing this space with Dr. Beverly Kienzle.
Hello, and welcome to today's section of St. Hildegard Speaks, the Hildegard Trail pilgrimage. Today, our speaker is Dr. Beverly Kienzle.
Oh, good morning. I'm just thrilled to be here.
And can you tell us where you're broadcasting from?
I am broadcasting from my study, which is now in Waltham, Massachusetts. I have a lovely view out the window where I have little birds and chipmunks climbing into the shrubs, and sometimes bunny rabbits, and my cats come and go in my lap.
That sounds like something that the Hildegard would probably have her cats coming and going as well.
I would think so. As we are learning from Dr. Esser's narratives, Hildegard spent her entire life in one region of the Rhineland. It's still a beautiful area where trees and living creatures flourish, as you can see. Hildegard came to understand spiritually what she saw around her and what you observe in the superb videos. Eventually, Hildegard incorporated all living creatures into her theology, a theology that envisioned the interconnectedness of all creation. For Hildegard, there was a unifying force of life that connected us humans to all creatures, to the elements, and to the cosmos. That life-giving strength is Veriditas, a unifying capacity of nature that is central to Hildegard's natural science, medicine, cosmology, and theology. Hildegard specialists use multiple translations of Veriditas, chiefly terms that emphasize the color green, greenness, verdure, verdance. They interpret the Hildegardian concept of Veriditas with natural, metaphorical, and theological dimensions. I often use the translation veridity to achieve a neutral meaning that does not favor one dimension or the other. So that's what I'll use when you hear me speak. At the heart of veridity is the color green, with associated meanings of growth, energy, strength, and renewal. Think of the energy that we see in the springtime and the energy that gives humans the strength to change and to repent, we hope. 3 principal meanings of veridity operative in Hildegard's works. First, the green color of new growth in nature and the very shades that develop over the summer in that fresh green. Second, the power or strength of human beings and other creatures to renew by healing or by reproduction. And third, the capacity for humans to repent from sin and to grow spiritually into renewal because of the rational and spiritual capacity endowed on us by God. Hildegard relates these manifestations of veridity to the power of the Holy Spirit, that is, God the Creator and God the Son, the Redeemer, working through the Holy Spirit. The complexity of veridity's meaning will unfold over the course of our pilgrimages as scenes of Hildegard land dazzle our vision and our imagination in these beautiful videos. Today, I want to focus on one feature of the landscape and one theological concept that Hildegard develops from veridity. When you look at the countryside in Hildegard land and Michael Conti's beautiful videos, focus on its primary features and ask what they are. The air and the sky, yes. The water of the rivers, yes. And the ground, the green mountains and green fields. What do you see reaching from the earth toward the sky? You got it, trees. This simple illustration of the earth from the Book of Divine Works, which Hildegard finished in 1173 to 1174, shows us people at work around the sphere of the earth and the roles that trees play in human activity and natural phenomena like the change of the seasons. Look closely at the 4 colors in the circle at the very center of the Earth's sphere. What do you think they represent? You guessed right, the 4 seasons. How many trees do you count? Who can get it first? Okay, you, 9. What are the concentric circles that are surrounding the Earth? The red one represents, what do you think? Fire. The dark blue is the air. The wavy lighter blue is waves, water. Remember that the 4 elements from higher to lower are fire, air, water, and earth. Hildegard envisions each zone, if you will, of the cosmos with phenomena or creatures particular to it. Notice the winds in the dark blue, the fish and the water, the medium light blue, the birds in the air, the trees reaching up towards the sky, and the humans at work, They are caring for the earth just as they should, according to Hildegard, and just as we should. Hildegard teaches that the fluids in our body are influenced by the elements of our natural environment: fire, air, water, earth, and that in turn the elements are affected by our behavior. In the narrative of Dr. Esser that we just heard, we met Hildegard as a child. She would have been aware of trees, surely, and their size compared to her own height. We wonder what her thoughts were then. When I was turning 10 years old, I saw sequoia and redwood trees in California, and I will never forget that. That might be why I'm coming back to trees now. Their magnitude is beyond imagination. Whatever Hildegard was thinking about trees and nature from an early age, though she didn't see the sequoias, she felt it so deeply that the human bond with trees and nature became part of her theology. When she was in her 40s, Hildegard's vision recounted in Schivius led her to insight about trees and their likeness to humans. And I'm going to read from Book 1, Vision 4 of Schivius. The soul gives vitality to the marrow in veins and members of the whole body, as the tree from its root gives sap and greenness to all the branches. And again, she says, the soul in the body is like a sap and a tree, and the soul's powers are like the form of the tree. How? The intellect in the soul is like the greenery of the trees, branches, and leaves. The will, like its flowers, the mind, like its bursting first fruits, the reason, like the perfected mature fruit, and the senses, like its size and shape. And so a person's body is strengthened and sustained by the soul. That's the end of the quote. Thus, Hildegard, in her 40s, compared the sap of the tree with the soul of a human being. There is no illustration in Schivius for that insight. But a dear friend of mine, Anita Dana, who was a visionary artist, gave us one. She sometimes experiences visions after reading excerpts from mystical writers. The visions impel her to paint what she sees. She retains every detail and all the colors of the visions that she sees. Reading Hildegard inspired in her visions with brilliant, breathtaking colors. When she read the passage we just heard from Schivius, she reproduced what she saw in this beautiful and insightful painting, the likeness of the soul to a tree. The greenness lightly and diffusely colors the human figure and grows stronger as it moves through the tree and up to the brilliant green leaves. Alternatively, it can be read as moving downward from the tree to the human. Whatever direction the greenness flows, or perhaps in both directions, it captures the theme of veridity that connects humans, trees, and all of God's creation. We know that trees and their complexity provide beauty and benefits to humans, but they also do to other living creatures, such as birds and small animals. The loss of the tree means the destruction of a home for small creatures like birds, chipmunks, and squirrels. Later in the pilgrimage, we will return to Hildegard's view of the interconnectedness of nature by reading excerpts from her homilies. She envisions great destruction of life because of human sin, something like what we are witnessing in our era, when humans have fouled the air and the water so much that the planet has become too hot and too dry to support life. The effects of not caring for the earth turn on humans and make human life less and less sustainable. But Hildegard tells us that nature will retain its veridity and keep growing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. That was lovely. We had just a few questions for you. So I was wondering, at what point in your academic career did you encounter Hildegard?
Well, it was not until I started to teach at Harvard Divinity School in the second half of the 80s, kind of the late 80s. And I was teaching Latin and looking for things other than the standard readings. And we had the benefit then of a wonderful bookstore at Harvard Divinity School, where the manager tried to keep up with everything current and was very engaged in whatever was new coming out. And at the time, it was Matthew Fox with his first books on Hildegard with the illustrations. And I remember one day when she says to me, "Beverly, you'll love this about the cosmic Christ." And I thought, what's that? So I got the books. I didn't have too much time to look at them then. And then there was Barbara Newman's Sister of Wisdom. And my students were all buzzing about that. So I kind of put them on hold until I had a break in what I was doing, which was working on medieval preaching. And as I did that, I realized, hey, there are no women in this history. There have to be some. And I started looking, and Barbara Newman pointed me to Hildegard's homilies, said she wasn't going to work on them. They needed to be edited again, and they needed to be studied. So I thought, wow, this is great. This is just what I need. And that's when I started. And I had been working on some 14th century manuscripts, but I didn't have a whole lot of formal experience in manuscripts until 1986, when I took a course. And still then, I felt that I would benefit from the help of someone who was more expert than I. So I recruited Carolyn Museg, who's speaking to us sometime during the pilgrimage, to help me look at the manuscript and analyze it, so I would be doing exactly the right thing to study it. And we were both helped by George Versoko, who also looked at it and studied it. And then that was a process of a few years. And in the 90s, Carolyn and I began the process of transatlantic editing. And we didn't have Zoom then. Wouldn't it have been great? But we got together, and she spent a couple of weeks with me one summer, and we worked and worked and worked. And we finally finished our draft. And eventually we had the publication of Hildegard's homilies, the Expositiones Evangeliorum, or homilies on the Gospels. And that was published by the prestigious Corpus Christianorum. And I was just absolutely thrilled to do something so highly medieval scholarly. And after all the work on it, I decided, well, geez, I spent years on this. There are 4 sets of footnotes, just to give you an idea how complicated those editions are. One of them is particularly challenging, and that's doing Hildegard sources, but I could go on about that for a long time. So I'll skip to thinking, well, after I've done all this work, I should translate the the homilies. And some of the manuscript work that we did led to different conclusions than the previous edition that was done in the 19th century. So that made changes in whatever translation I had in mind. So anyway, quickly, that is in a couple of years, I published the translation of the homilies on the Gospels. And I can keep going, but I'll just say quickly and then let you pick out some questions. I've become more and more enamored of Hildegard. What began as a very scholarly enterprise for an audience of medievalists, really, has ended up with me studying Veriditas and celebrating Hildegard's love of nature.
Thank you for Dr. Kienzle for sharing those beautiful words with us, and I'm looking forward to our experience with you later in the week with another recording we did with you. I'm going to pass the baton back over to Shannon here so she can go ahead and set us up for going into the breakout rooms.
Yes, thank you. So I was inspired to pull down our framed image that we have here in the Hildegard house. Throughout the Hildegard house, we have quite a few pieces of Hildegard's works on display, some very beautiful presentations, and this is the piece that you just heard Dr. Beverly discuss. So that was wonderful. As we prepare to move into our anchorage rooms, we'll like to throw out a question for you to ponder. So take a moment to consider what you've heard today in the video from the Hildegard Way, from our scholar, and ask yourself, what did you learn today that might be new? Some of you might be coming to this pilgrimage with a long history of a relationship with St. Hildegard. For some of you, I know I've had a few conversations with pilgrims who this is your first encounter with Hildegard, and so I imagine some of it can be a bit overwhelming. But just to take a moment, consider what did you learn today that really was new and or touched you in a way, maybe personally, maybe as Dr. Beverly highlighted, she was first drawn to Hildegard from an academic place, and then it seemed to move deeper. Maybe you're approaching Hildegard from more of a perspective of the mind. Is there something that came up today in our presentations that you need or would like further clarification on? Was something shared that is confusing you? And just basically, how did today's journey touch you personally? Any of those questions, or if you have something of your own, the questions that we put out for the anchorage rooms are simply conversation starters. My experience in the anchorage yesterday was that conversation starter wasn't really even necessary because there is so much energy and so much excitement around these topics. You may have something entirely different you'd like to talk about, and that is wonderful as well. And so if Michael's ready, I think we'll be breaking out here shortly.